Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a world where the brush never touches the canvas, where the sculptor never feels the clay between their fingers, where music writes itself from nothing but whispered instructions. This is not science fiction. This is happening right now, in studios and bedrooms and server farms across the world. A quiet revolution is unfolding, one that asks the oldest and most haunting question humanity has ever faced. What does it mean to create? Tonight, we're going to drift together through a landscape that exists somewhere between the mechanical and the magical, between cold silicon and warm human longing. We're going to explore what happens when artificial intelligence meets art, not just as a tool, not just as a novelty, but as something that might fundamentally reshape what we understand about creativity, consciousness, and the very essence of being human. And I promise you, by the time we reach the end of this journey, you will never look at a painting, a song, or even your own thoughts in quite the same way again. So wherever you are right now, I hope you're comfortable. I hope you're safe. I hope you can let the world outside fade just a little, because we have a long night ahead of us, and the territory we're about to explore is vast, strange, and more beautiful than you might imagine. Let us begin with something simple, a question. When you look at a painting, what are you really seeing? You might say colour and form, light and shadow, the careful arrangement of elements that please the eye. But that is only the surface. Beneath every artwork lies something invisible but undeniable: intention. The artist saw something in their mind, felt something in their heart, and through hours or days or years of effort, they translated that inner experience into something you can perceive. Every brushstroke carries the weight of decision. Every note in a melody is a choice made from infinite possibilities. For thousands of years, this has been the sacred contract of art. A human consciousness reaches across time and space to touch another human consciousness. The artist speaks, and the viewer listens, and in that exchange something miraculous happens. We call it beauty, or truth, or meaning. We do not always have words for it, but we know it when we feel it. It is the shiver that runs down your spine when you stand before a painting that seems to look back at you. It is the catch in your throat when a song captures exactly what you could never say. It is proof that you're not alone, that others have felt what you feel, seen what you see, struggled with what haunts you in the dark. But now, something has changed. The machines have learned to paint. They have learned to compose music, to write poetry, to craft images so realistic or so surreal that they stop you in your tracks. And they are doing it without consciousness, without lived experience, without anything we would recognize as a soul. So the question becomes urgent, almost frightening. If a machine can create art, what does that say about art itself? What does it say about us? To understand where we are, we must first understand where we came from. The story of artificial intelligence creating art is not as new as you might think. It stretches back further than the internet, further than personal computers, all the way to the earliest days of computing itself. In the 1960s, when computers were room-sized machines accessible only to scientists and researchers, artists began to wonder what these thinking machines might be capable of beyond calculation. They were pioneers, visionaries who saw potential where others saw only circuits and punch cards. One of these pioneers was a man named Harold Cohen, an artist who spent decades developing a program he called aiart. Beginning in the early 1970s, Cohen taught his program to draw, not by giving it explicit instructions for every line, but by building rules and systems that could generate unique artworks. Aiart would create abstract compositions, and later evolved to draw human figures, plants, and complex scenes. Cohen would sometimes colour these drawings by hand, creating a collaboration between human and machine. It was slow, painstaking work, and the results were strange and compelling. The machine was making choices, following its programming in ways that surprised even its creator. What makes Cohen's work so fascinating is that he never pretended Aaron was truly creative in the way a human is creative. He was honest about its limitations. Aaron did not know what a person was, did not understand beauty or emotion. It followed rules Cohen had painstakingly encoded, yet the outputs were undeniably artistic. They had balance and rhythm and a peculiar aesthetic quality. People responded to them, museums exhibited them, and Cohen spent the rest of his life wrestling with the question, was Aaron creating art, or was it merely executing Cohen's vision through an elaborate mechanical process? The 1980s and 90s saw slow but steady progress. Artists experimented with algorithms that could generate fractals, those infinitely complex patterns that echo the structures we see in nature. Composers used computers to explore new forms of music, generating compositions that no human could perform or even fully comprehend. But these were niche pursuits, confined to academic circles and experimental art communities. The tools were difficult to use, the results often more interesting as concepts than as finished works. The average person would never encounter algorithmic art, would never wonder whether a computer could be creative. Then came the revolution. In the 2000s and 2010s, advances in machine learning began to accelerate at a pace that startled even the researchers driving them forward. Neural networks, computer systems loosely modelled on the structure of the human brain, started showing capabilities that had seemed impossibly distant just years before. They learned to recognize faces, to translate languages, to beat the world's best players at games once thought to require human intuition. And inevitably, they turned their attention to art. The key breakthrough was something called a generative adversarial network, or GAN. Developed by researcher Ian Goodfellow and his colleagues in 2014, GANs represented a fundamentally new approach to machine creativity. Instead of following rules set by a programmer, GANs learned by looking at thousands or millions of examples. Two neural networks would work in tandem. One would generate images, the other would judge them. The generator would try to fool the judge, creating images realistic enough to pass as real. The judge would try to spot the fakes. Through countless iterations, both networks would improve, locked in an adversarial dance that pushed the generator to create ever more convincing outputs. What this meant in practice was stunning. Feed a GAN thousands of photographs of faces, and it would learn to generate new faces of people who'd never existed. Show it paintings from across art history, and it would create works in styles it had absorbed and recombined. The results were often strange, sometimes deeply unsettling, but they were also undeniably impressive. Artists like Mario Klingemann and Robbie Barat began using GANs to create works that pushed the boundaries of what machine-generated art could be. Klingemann created portraits that seemed to peer out from some uncanny valley between human and algorithm. Barat trained networks on everything from classical nudes to fashion photography, producing images that were beautiful, disturbing, and utterly novel. But it was in 2018 that AI art exploded into mainstream consciousness. A French collective called Obvious used a GAN to create a portrait titled Portrait of Edmond de Bellamy. The painting depicted a man in formal dress, his features slightly blurred and distorted, as if seen through a dream. It was signed not with a human name, but with part of the mathematical formula used to create it. When Christie's auction house put the work up for sale, the art world paid attention. The estimates were modest, perhaps $7,000 to $10,000. But when the hammer fell, the price was $432,000. The sale sparked fierce debate. Was this really art? Who was the artist? The programmers who created the algorithm, the collective who selected and framed the output, or the machine itself? Critics pointed out that the work was derivative, that the AI had been trained on classical portraits and was simply remixing what it had learned. Defenders argued that all artists learn by studying the masters, that originality has always been about recombination and reinterpretation. The controversy raged in newspapers and galleries, at dinner tables and on social media. And while the experts argued, something more significant was happening. The world was waking up to the fact that machines could create images that moved people, that sold for extraordinary sums, that could no longer be easily dismissed as mere technical curiosities. Around the same time, the tools were becoming accessible. Google released Deep Dream, an algorithm that could transform ordinary photographs into hallucinogenic visions, finding patterns and amplifying them until images seemed to writhe with dogs and eyes and impossible geometries. It was deeply strange, often nightmarish, but it was also free and available to anyone with an internet connection. Artists and amateurs alike began experimenting, feeding Deep Dream everything from family photos to famous paintings, watching as the algorithm found hidden dimensions within the familiar. Then came the text-to-image revolution. OpenAI, a research organization dedicated to ensuring artificial intelligence benefits humanity, developed Clip, a system that could understand the relationship between text and images. This was the missing piece. For the first time, you could describe what you wanted in plain language, and an AI system could generate it. Not perfectly, not always predictably, but with enough success to feel like magic. Type an astronaut riding a horse in the style of Van Gogh, and watch as the algorithm dreams it into existence. Building on Clip and related technologies, a wave of new tools emerged. DALL-E, named as a playful combination of Salvador Dali and the Pixar robot Wall-E, could generate images from text descriptions with startling creativity. Midjourney, launched through the chat platform Discord, developed a devoted following of artists and experimenters who marveled at its ability to create dreamlike, highly aesthetic images. Stable Diffusion, released as open-source software, put powerful image generation into the hands of anyone with a decent computer. And suddenly, art created by artificial intelligence was not a curiosity or an academic exercise. It was everywhere. The tools were improving at a rate that seemed almost impossible to track. Each month brought new capabilities, new refinements. The early awkwardness, the telltale signs that an image was AI-generated began to fade. Hands that had once emerged as twisted claws learned to look natural. Faces that had been subtly wrong, eyes misaligned or expressions uncanny, became increasingly human. Text that had been gibberish gradually resolved into readable words. The gap between human and machine creation was not closing, not exactly, but it was becoming harder to define, harder to point to with confidence. Artists found themselves working with these tools in ways that range from enthusiastic embrace to cautious experimentation to outright rejection. Some saw AI as the ultimate democratization of art, a way for people without technical skill to express visions they could only imagine. Others viewed it as a powerful new brush, another tool in the creative arsenal alongside pencils and Photoshop, and still others saw it as a threat a technology that devalued years of training, that could flood the market with cheap content, that reduced the sacred act of creation to button pushing and prompt writing. Consider the experience of typing a description into Midjourney. You write something simple at first. A sunset over mountains. The algorithm thinks for a few seconds and 4 images appear. They are beautiful, professional, the kind of images that would not look out of place in a travel magazine. But they are also generic, lacking personality. So you refine, you add details. A sunset over mountains, purple and orange sky, dramatic clouds, ancient stone tower in the foreground, magical atmosphere, trending on ArtStation. The results improve, they become more specific, more striking. You iterate again, adding style references, tweaking words, until something emerges that matches the picture in your mind. Hours pass. You've generated hundreds of images, curated them, refined them, learned the language that makes the AI understand your vision. Is this creation? The question nags. You did not paint this image. You did not even touch a brush or a stylus. You typed words. But you also made countless decisions. You chose what to keep and what to discard. You developed an aesthetic sense for what worked. You learned, in a real sense, to speak to the machine, and the final image, the one you select and share and perhaps even sell, emerged from that dialogue. So who created it? The artists training the algorithms on small personal datasets offer one answer. Helena Sarin, a visual artist, trains her neural networks not on the vast ocean of internet images, but on her own watercolors, sketches, and photographs. The AI learns her style, her preferences, her artistic voice, and then helps her explore variations and possibilities she might never have discovered through traditional means alone. David Young feeds his networks his own photography, teaching them to see the world through his eyes, and then show him new ways to interpret what they have learned. This is collaboration in a deep sense. The human brings vision and curation and aesthetic judgment. The machine brings processing power, the ability to generate thousands of variations, to explore the space of possibilities far more thoroughly than any human could in a lifetime. But this raises uncomfortable questions when we zoom out to the larger picture. Because most AI art tools are not trained on small personal datasets curated by individual artists. They are trained on billions of images scraped from the internet. Every photograph ever uploaded to Flickr, every illustration posted on DeviantArt, every artwork catalogued in digital museums. The machines have learned by looking at the collective output of human creativity, absorbing styles and techniques and visual languages developed over centuries. And the artists whose work was used to train these systems were never asked for permission. They were not compensated. They were not even informed. This is where the dream of AI art crashes into the harsh realities of copyright law and economic survival. In January of 2023, a group of artists filed a lawsuit against several AI companies. Sarah Anderson, Kelly McKernan, and Carla Ortiz, working with lawyers Joseph Saveri and Matthew Butterick, argued that their copyrighted works had been used without permission to train Stable Diffusion, the AI model underlying many image generation tools. The lawsuit was not simply about credit or recognition. It was about the fundamental question of whether artists should have control over how their work is used, and whether companies should be able to build billion-dollar businesses on the backs of creators who receive nothing in return. The legal arguments were complex. The AI companies invoked fair use, a doctrine that allows copyrighted material to be used without permission under certain circumstances such as for education, criticism, or transformative creative purposes. They argued that training an AI model was a transformative use, that the neural network did not store copies of the training images, but rather learned abstract patterns and relationships. Therefore, they claimed, generating new images based on that learning was no different from a human artist studying the masters and developing their own style. The artist countered that the AI systems did in fact store compressed representations of their work, and that these systems were specifically designed to generate images in the style of specific artists, sometimes on command. Type in the style of Kelly McKernan into Midjourney, and you could generate images that looked remarkably like McKernan's distinctive work. How was this different from forgery? How was this fair use when it directly competed with and potentially replaced the original artist's ability to earn a living? The courts have been wrestling with these questions, and the outcomes remain uncertain. In August of 2024, Judge William Orrick allowed key copyright claims to proceed, finding that there was a plausible case that Stable Diffusion had been designed to facilitate infringement. But other claims were dismissed, and the central questions have not been resolved. Meanwhile, the opposite side of the copyright debate has emerged. Artists creating images with AI have sought copyright protection for their work, only to be rejected by the Copyright Office. Jason Allen, who created an award-winning image called Theatre d'Opera Spatial using Midjourney, was denied copyright because he could not claim authorship of the AI-generated elements. The office ruled that copyright requires human authorship, and that images created primarily by an algorithm do not qualify, regardless of how much effort went into crafting the prompts that produced them. So we find ourselves in a strange and contradictory place. The AI companies argue that using copyrighted works to train their models is fair use because the AI is not making copies but learning patterns. Yet the artists using AI to generate images cannot claim copyright because they did not make the images themselves. Meanwhile, traditional artists watch as their styles are absorbed, replicated and monetized by systems they have no control over, while the platforms hosting these systems claim no responsibility for how they are used. It is a tangle of law and ethics and economics that we are only beginning to unravel. Beyond the courtrooms, the impact on working artists has been profound and often painful. Illustrators who once earned steady incomes creating concept art for games, covers for books, or promotional images for businesses have watched their opportunities evaporate. Why pay a human artist several hundred or several $1,000s for a commission when you can generate something comparable for the cost of a monthly subscription? The calculus is brutal and simple, especially for businesses operating on thin margins. Some artists report that their client base has collapsed. Art directors who once hired them now browse AI-generated images for a fraction of the cost. The work may not be quite as good, may lack the subtle refinements and creative problem-solving that come from human collaboration, but it is often good enough. And in a world where good enough costs pennies while excellence costs dollars, the economic pressures are overwhelming. This is not hypothetical. This is happening now in real time as artists retrain for new careers or struggle to find niches where human creativity still commands a premium. Yet the story is not one of simple displacement. Some artists have adapted, learning to use AI tools as part of their workflow. They generate concepts quickly, iterate faster, use the AI to explore possibilities before committing to a final piece that they refine by hand. Others have carved out identities as AI artists, developing distinctive styles and approaches that showcase what these tools can do in skilled hands. The market for AI art is growing, with galleries and collectors interested in this new frontier, and for every artist who has lost work to AI, There are amateurs and enthusiasts who can now create visual content that would have been impossible for them before. This democratization cuts both ways. Access to creative tools has never been more widespread. A teenager with a laptop can generate professional quality images. A writer can create illustrations for their story without hiring an artist. A small business can produce marketing materials without a design budget. This is empowering. This is revolutionary. This is also devastating to professional creatives who have spent years developing skills that are suddenly less valuable in the marketplace. Sources for Part 1: Art History and Development of AI Art from news.artnet.com, bbc.com, en.wikipedia.org, cafa.com.cn, foam.org. Technical details on GANs, clip, and diffusion models from interactiondesign.org. Information on AI art tools from ryanschultz.com, loveart.as. Columbia University seminar details from zuckermaninstitute.columbia.edu. Creative process discussions from dailyjester.org. Copyright lawsuit information from theartnewspaper.com, hollywoodreporter.com, itsartlaw.org, artnews.com, nuvka.com, hbr.org. Technical mechanisms from computationalcreativity.net. Impact on traditional artists from arexiv.org. Part 1, complete, continued in Part 2. Part 2. The philosophical dimensions of AI art run deeper than economics or copyright. They touch on questions that have occupied thinkers for millennia. What is creativity? Where does it come from? Is it a uniquely human capacity, something that emerges from consciousness and lived experience? Or is it a process that can be replicated, simulated, or perhaps even genuinely instantiated in non-biological systems? Traditional theories of creativity emphasize intention, agency, skill, and expression. An artist has an idea, develops the technical ability to manifest that idea, and through the creative act expresses something about their experience of being alive. The artwork becomes a window into another consciousness, a way for the artist to communicate what cannot be captured in ordinary language. This view places the human at the center of the creative process. Creativity is something we do, something that defines us, that separates us from machines and animals and everything else that exists but does not create. But consider this. Marcel Duchamp took a mass-produced urinal, signed it with a pseudonym, titled it Fountain, and submitted it to an art exhibition in 1917. He did not craft the urinal. He did not design it or manufacture it. He simply selected it, recontextualized it, and declared it art. The creative act was not in making, but in framing, in the conceptual decision to present this ordinary object as art, and thereby force viewers to reconsider their assumptions about what art could be. If we accept Fountain as a creative work, and the art world overwhelmingly has, then we must accept that creativity does not require traditional craftsmanship or technical skill. Andy Warhol's Brillo boxes make a similar point. Warhol reproduced the design of commercial Brillo soap pad boxes, creating sculptures that were nearly indistinguishable from the mass-produced originals. Again, the creativity lay not in manual skill or even in original design, but in the conceptual reframing, in asking what happens when you take something mundane and place it in a gallery. If such works are creative despite lacking traditional artistic labour, then why should AI-generated images be excluded from the category of art, especially when they too are subject to human selection, curation, and framing? The counter-argument is that Duchamp and Warhol were human beings making conscious, intentional decisions. Their works were creative because they, as conscious agents, chose to reframe these objects as art. The AI, by contrast, has no intentions. It does not understand what it is creating. It does not know what art is, what beauty is, what any of the images it generates mean. It is simply executing mathematical operations, transforming input data through layers of computation to produce output data. To call this creativity, the argument goes, is to fundamentally misunderstand what creativity is. But is intention necessary for creativity? Is consciousness required? These are not easy questions, and different philosophical traditions offer different answers. Some argue that creativity must involve purposeful expression of an inner life, and therefore cannot exist without consciousness. Others suggest that creativity can exist in degrees, that it is not a binary property that something either has or lacks, but a spectrum. Perhaps the AI exhibits a limited form of creativity, not equivalent to human creativity, but not entirely different either. Consider the way neural networks learn. They are exposed to millions of images and gradually adjust their internal parameters to recognize patterns. What is a cat? The network learns by seeing thousands of cats, noting the statistical regularities, pointed ears, whiskers, certain proportions and textures. What is a particular artistic style? The network learns by analyzing many examples, absorbing the characteristic color palettes, brushstroke patterns, compositional choices. This is not so different, at a high level, from how human artists learn. You study the masters, you practice, you internalize the rules and techniques until they become second nature. The difference is that humans also have subjective experience, emotions, a sense of self. We feel what we create. We have reasons, conscious and unconscious, for our choices. Or do we? Neuroscience has revealed that much of what we call conscious decision-making is actually the brain rationalizing choices that were made by unconscious processes. You reach for a particular color, and a moment later your conscious mind constructs a story about why that color was the right choice. But the reaching happened first. The justification came after. The boundary between conscious intention and unconscious process is far less clear than we intuitively believe. If much of human creativity emerges from processes we're not consciously aware of, processes that are essentially computational in nature, then the gap between human and machine creativity becomes harder to define. There is also the question of what we mean by creativity in the first place. Is it the ability to generate novelty? AI systems excel at this. They can produce images and music and text that have never existed before, combinations of elements that are genuinely new. Is creativity the ability to surprise? Again, AI often produces outputs that surprise even the people who created the algorithms. Researchers training neural networks frequently find that their systems develop capabilities or exhibit behaviors that were not explicitly programmed, emergent properties that arise from the complex interaction of millions of parameters. Perhaps creativity requires what we might call cultural or conceptual understanding. A truly creative work does not just look new. It engages with ideas, challenges assumptions, participates in a dialogue with the viewer. Can AI do this? The answer is complicated. An AI system does not understand the cultural context of what it creates. It does not know that placing a certain symbol in an image will evoke particular associations, carry specific weight. It learns statistical correlations but not meaning. Yet the images it produces can still engage viewers, can still evoke emotional responses, can still participate in cultural conversations, even if the machine itself is oblivious to all of this. This brings us to the concept of distributed agency, an idea gaining traction in philosophical discussions of AI art. Rather than asking whether the human or the machine is the true creator, distributed agency suggests that creativity in the age of AI is a collaborative process involving multiple actors. The programmers who develop the algorithms, the artists whose work trains the models, the users who craft prompts and select outputs, the algorithms themselves as they process and generate, and finally the viewers who interpret and assign meaning. All of these participants contribute to the creative act, each in different ways. From this perspective, it is meaningless to ask whether AI is truly creative or whether the human is the sole creator. The creativity emerges from the system as a whole, from the interaction of all these agents. This is not unprecedented. Collaborative artworks, improvisational performances, even traditional studio systems where many hands contribute to a single piece, all involve distributed agency to some degree. AI art simply makes this distribution more explicit and more complex. Walter Benjamin, writing in the 1930s about mechanical reproduction, argued that technologies like photography and film changed the nature of art by eliminating what he called the aura, the unique presence and authenticity of an original artwork. A painting exists in one place, carries the history of its creation, the touch of the artist's hand. A photograph can be reproduced infinitely, each copy identical, each lacking that singular presence. Benjamin saw this as both a loss and a democratization, making art more accessible but also more commodified. AI art pushes this even further. An AI-generated image has no original in the traditional sense. It is not a copy or a reproduction. It is something entirely new, generated from learned patterns, existing first and only as digital data. You can print it, display it on screens, modify it, generate variations, but there is no authentic original to which all these versions refer. This challenges our traditional concepts of artistic authenticity and value. If there is no original, what are we valuing? The uniqueness of the specific output, the human curation and framing, the concept behind the work. Some philosophers argue that AI art requires entirely new aesthetic frameworks, that our existing ways of thinking about art are inadequate for this new medium. The philosopher Catherine Thompson-Jones has explored how AI challenges the relationship between artists and tools. Traditional tools extend human capability but remain under human control. A brush allows you to apply paint in ways your fingers alone cannot, but every mark is directly responsive to your intention. AI tools are different. They have their own internal logic, their own emergent behaviors. You guide them, but you do not control them in the same way. The relationship is more like collaboration, or even negotiation than straightforward use. This collaborative nature of AI art can be seen clearly in the work of artists who have embraced these technologies thoughtfully. Sugwen Chung is an artist and researcher who works with robotic systems in live drawing performances. She draws with her hand while a robotic arm, controlled by AI trained on her previous work, draws alongside her. The two influence each other in real time. Chung responds to what the robot creates. The robot adapts to Chung's actions. The final artwork emerges from this genuine dialogue between human and machine. It is not simply Chung using a tool, it is two agents, one human and one artificial, creating something neither could have made alone. Anne Spalter, a pioneer of digital art, has explored AI tools extensively while maintaining a critical perspective on their limitations and implications. She uses AI as one element in her creative process, combining it with traditional techniques and digital manipulation. For Spalter, AI is powerful but not autonomous. It is a way to generate raw material, to explore possibilities, to add certain aesthetic qualities, but always in service of a larger artistic vision that remains fundamentally human. Refik Anadol creates immersive installations that use machine learning to transform vast datasets into flowing, dreamlike visualizations. His work Machine Hallucinations uses algorithms trained on hundreds of thousands of images to generate ever-shifting patterns that feel organic, almost alive. Anadol describes his work as making visible the hidden patterns in data, giving form to the machine's way of seeing. The result is spectacular, overwhelming, a direct encounter with the aesthetic dimension of artificial intelligence. And yet Anadol is undeniably the artist. He selects the datasets, configures the algorithms, shapes the presentation, makes countless creative decisions that determine how the work unfolds. These examples point toward a possible future where AI art is understood not as machines replacing humans, but as a new mode of collaboration, a hybrid practice that combines human vision with computational power. But this optimistic vision coexists uneasily with the economic and ethical realities we discussed earlier. For every artist thoughtfully exploring human-AI collaboration, there are thousands using AI to quickly generate content for commercial purposes, and millions of images being created by people with no artistic training or intention, beyond making something that looks cool or goes viral. The sheer volume of AI-generated content is itself a phenomenon worth considering. In the past, creating an image required significant time and skill. This acted as a natural filter. Most people could not create professional quality images, so the number of such images in the world was limited by the number of skilled artists and the time they could devote to their work. AI has removed this bottleneck. Anyone can generate dozens of images per hour. The internet is being flooded with AI content, and this flood is only beginning. What does this mean for human attention and aesthetic experience? When images are abundant beyond measure, does any individual image become less valuable? When anyone can generate a beautiful landscape or a striking portrait on demand, does the concept of a special or meaningful image begin to erode? Or does this abundance simply shift what we value, placing greater emphasis on concept, curation, context, the story behind the image rather than the image itself? These are not merely abstract questions. They have real consequences for how we experience art and culture. Consider social media, already saturated with images competing for attention. Now imagine that saturation multiplied 100-fold as AI generation becomes ubiquitous. How do we navigate that landscape? How do we distinguish the meaningful from the noise? The answer may lie in returning to fundamentals. We value art not just because it looks beautiful, but because it communicates something, because it comes from somewhere, because it participates in human culture and dialogue. An AI can generate a technically perfect sunset, but if it comes from nowhere, means nothing, was created by no one for no reason other than to exist, does it carry the same weight as a photograph taken by someone standing in a specific place at a specific moment, choosing to capture that particular light? The photograph is a record of experience. The AI image is a successful execution of an algorithm. Both might be visually identical, but their relationships to human experience are fundamentally different. This brings us back to the question of emotional expression, one of the most contentious aspects of AI art. Can a machine express emotion? The obvious answer seems to be no. Expression implies having something to express, an inner state that the artwork externalizes. Machines do not have inner states, at least not in any way we currently understand. They process data, they execute computations. Where would emotion enter into this? And yet AI can create images that evoke emotion in viewers. A portrait generated by an algorithm can look sad, joyful, contemplative. A landscape can feel serene or ominous. The emotional impact is real, even if the machine that created it felt nothing. This suggests that emotion in art may be less about what the artist felt and more about what the viewer experiences. The artwork becomes a site where meaning is constructed through the interaction of the object and the observer. This is not a new idea. Reader response theory in literature and reception theory in art history have long argued that meaning is not fixed in the artwork itself, but emerges through the active interpretation of the audience. An AI-generated image simply makes this more explicit. The machine cannot embed emotional content in the way a human artist supposedly can, but the viewer can still project emotion onto the image, can still respond with genuine feeling. Recent studies have shown that viewers respond to AI-generated art with similar emotional intensity as they do to human-made art, at least when they do not know which is which. In controlled experiments using abstract black and white images, participants rated AI and human artworks comparably on emotional resonance. Only when informed that an image was AI-generated did responses sometimes shift, suggesting that our expectations and biases play a significant role in how we experience art. This raises an uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps much of what we value in human-made art is not actually in the artwork itself, but in the story we tell about it, the knowledge that it came from a human consciousness, the sense of connection to another person. The artwork serves as a focal point for those feelings, but the feelings might not depend as much on the qualities of the artwork as we like to believe. If this is true, then AI art forces us to confront something disquieting about our relationship with art itself. But there is another perspective. Perhaps the importance of knowing an artwork came from a human is not a bias to be overcome, but a legitimate aspect of what makes art matter. We do not value art as abstract beauty existing in a vacuum. We value it as a form of communication, connection, witness. When we look at a painting from centuries ago, we're not just seeing colours and shapes. We're reaching across time to touch the consciousness of someone long dead. We're saying you existed, you saw the world, you made this, and now I see it too. That human connection is not incidental to art. It is the heart of what makes art meaningful. From this view, AI-generated images might be impressive, might be beautiful, might be useful, but they lack the fundamental quality that makes something truly art. They do not come from someone. They are not acts of human expression and communication. They are simulations of such acts. Sophisticated and convincing simulations perhaps, but simulations nonetheless. To treat them as equivalent to human-made art is to misunderstand what art is for. Both perspectives have merit, and perhaps both are true in different contexts. An AI-generated illustration used in a commercial project might be judged purely on aesthetic and functional criteria. Does it look good? Does it serve its purpose? The origin matters less than the result. But an artwork intended to be contemplated, to carry meaning, to stand as a cultural object, might require human authorship to fulfill that role. The same image could be both, depending on how it is framed and used. This ambiguity is likely to persist. We are living through a transition period, watching in real time as new technologies disrupt established categories and force us to reconsider what we thought we understood. The answers will not come quickly, and they may never be fully resolved. Art has always been contested territory, its boundaries debated, its definitions challenged. AI is simply the latest and perhaps most fundamental challenge to our assumptions about creativity, authorship, and meaning. Sources for Part 2, philosophical discussions on creativity and AI from Scientia.ubc.ca, reddit.com, philosophy subreddit, blog.jlips.com, dailynews.com, ludo.ai. Human-AI collaboration examples from montrealethics.ai, worklife.vc@news.harvard.edu, computational creativity mechanisms from computationalcreativity.net, icassist@meeting.org, emotional expression in AI art from reachingmydreams.com. Part 2, complete. Continued in Part 3. Part 3. Let us shift our perspective now and consider the technical heart of how these systems actually work. To understand what is happening when an AI creates art, we must descend into the architecture of neural networks, the mathematics of training, the strange and beautiful ways that meaning emerges from millions of numerical operations. This may sound dry, mechanical, but I promise you it is anything but. The mechanisms underlying AI art are as intricate and fascinating as any natural process, and understanding them changes how you see the outputs. At the core of most modern AI art systems is a type of neural network called a diffusion model. To understand diffusion models, imagine that you have a perfect, clear photograph. Now imagine gradually adding noise to it, random static, until eventually the image is completely obscured, indistinguishable from pure randomness. This is the forward process, destruction, the transformation of order into chaos. Now imagine learning to reverse that process, to take pure noise and gradually remove it, revealing a coherent image. This is what diffusion models learn to do. The training process is remarkable. The model is shown millions of images, and for each one various levels of noise are added. The model learns to predict what the image looked like before the noise was added, to see through the static to the structure beneath. Through countless iterations, adjusting millions of parameters, the model becomes astonishingly good at this task. And once it has learned to denoise images, it can generate new images by starting with pure noise and progressively refining it, each step removing a little more randomness until something coherent emerges. But how does the model know what kind of image to create? This is where text encoding comes in. Systems like Stable Diffusion and DALL-E use a component called CLIP, which understands the relationship between text and images. CLIP was trained by looking at millions of image caption pairs scraped from the internet. It learned that certain words tend to appear with certain visual features. The word cat appears with images containing specific shapes, textures, and patterns. The word sunset correlates with particular color gradients and compositional structures. When you type a prompt into an AI art generator, CLIP transforms your text into a high-dimensional mathematical representation, a point in an abstract space where meanings are arranged by their relationships. The word king sits close to queen and crown and throne, far from ocean and molecule. This mathematical space captures semantic relationships, the way concepts relate to each other, in a form the neural network can work with. The diffusion model then uses this text representation as a guide during the denoising process. At each step, as it removes noise and adds structure, it tries to move toward the kind of image that would correspond to your text prompt. It is searching through the space of all possible images for one that matches your description. The process is not deterministic. Small differences in the random starting noise lead to very different final images, which is why you can generate infinite variations from the same prompt. What makes this especially fascinating is that the model has never seen your exact prompt before, and has never created this exact image before. It is genuinely generating something new by combining patterns it has learned. If you ask for a robot painting a portrait of a cat, the model has learned what robots look like, what painting looks like, what portraits look like, what cats look like, and crucially, how these concepts can be combined in coherent spatial arrangements. It composes the scene by drawing on all this learned knowledge, synthesizing elements in ways that follow the statistical regularities of images it has seen, but producing a specific configuration that is novel. The earlier Gian systems worked differently but were based on similar principles. A generator network would create images, and a discriminator network would try to determine whether they were real or fake. The generator's goal was to fool the discriminator, creating images so realistic that the discriminator could not tell them apart from training data. Through this adversarial process, both networks improved. The discriminator became better at spotting fakes, which forced the generator to become better at creating convincing images. Eventually, the generator could produce images that even the highly trained discriminator could not reliably distinguish from real photographs or paintings. What's remarkable about both approaches is that the systems learned features and representations that humans never explicitly programmed. Early layers of the neural network might learn to detect simple features like edges and colors. Middle layers combine these into more complex patterns, textures, and shapes. Deep layers represent high-level concepts, objects, styles, compositions. This hierarchical organization emerges naturally from the training process, mirroring in some ways how the human visual system is organized. And just like human vision, these networks can be fooled, can exhibit illusions and biases. They might systematically misinterpret certain kinds of images or fail in specific ways when confronted with inputs different from their training data. They might generate hands with too many fingers, because hands appear in such varied configurations in photographs that the statistical average is ambiguous. They might struggle with text because letters and words require a kind of precise symbolic representation that does not emerge naturally from image statistics. These failures are informative. They reveal that the networks are not truly understanding images in the way humans do. They are pattern matchers, extraordinarily sophisticated and powerful pattern matchers, but they lack the conceptual frameworks and common sense that humans bring to visual interpretation. A human knows that hands have 5 fingers, not because we have seen enough hands to form a statistical average, but because we have embodied knowledge. We have hands. We understand them as functional objects in a way that goes beyond their visual appearance. Yet within their domain, neural networks exhibit capabilities that can seem almost magical. They can perform style transfer, taking the artistic style of one image and applying it to the content of another. You can feed in a photograph and a Van Gogh painting, and the network will reimagine your photograph as if Van Gogh had painted it, with his characteristic swirling brush strokes and vivid colours. This works because the network can separate style from content, representing them in different parts of its learned feature space, and then recombining them in new ways. They can interpolate, smoothly transitioning between different concepts, generate an image of a cat, then gradually morph it into a dog, and the intermediate images will show hybrid creatures that combine features of both, exploring the continuous space between these discrete categories. Generate portraits in different styles, and you can smoothly blend from Renaissance to Impressionist to Cubist, watching as the visual language gradually shifts. They can even perform semantic editing, where you describe a change in natural language and the network modifies the image accordingly. Take a generated image of a woman and add the phrase, "wearing sunglasses," and sunglasses appear on her face. The network understands how to manipulate its internal representations to incorporate the new concept while preserving the rest of the image. This is not simple copy and paste. The sunglasses are generated to match the perspective, lighting, and style of the original image, integrated seamlessly into the scene. These capabilities emerge from the training process without being explicitly programmed. The researchers who develop these systems do not write rules for how to blend styles or add sunglasses or morph between concepts. They create the architecture, provide the training data, and let the network learn through training. The emergent behaviors, the unexpected capabilities, the ways these networks can be coaxed and guided, all arise from the complex interaction of architecture, data, and optimization algorithms. This emergent nature makes working with AI art tools feel less like using a traditional tool and more like exploring a strange new terrain. You discover what works through experimentation, building intuition about how the model responds to different prompts, learning its quirks and tendencies. Some artists have become remarkably skilled at this, developing prompt engineering into an art form of its own. They know that adding trending on ArtStation tends to increase visual polish, that specifying Octane render produces certain lighting effects, that naming particular artists will invoke recognizable stylistic elements. This knowledge is passed around in communities, shared in forums and Discord servers, documented in guides that read like grimoires of digital sorcery. The language that works best for these systems is not natural human language, but a kind of specialized jargon, evolved through collective trial and error to communicate effectively with the peculiar way neural networks pass meaning. It is a new literacy, a skill set that did not exist 5 years ago, and that will likely evolve rapidly in the years ahead. The datasets these models train on are themselves worth examining. They are massive, containing billions of images scraped from across the internet. Layan 5B, one of the largest public datasets, contains 5 billion image text pairs. It includes photographs from Flickr, illustrations from art sharing sites, screenshots from websites, product images from online stores, memes, diagrams, logos, and essentially anything that exists online in visual form. This comprehensiveness is both the strength and the weakness of these systems. The strength is that the model learns an incredibly broad understanding of visual culture. It has seen images from every corner of human creativity, every style and subject and genre. It can combine elements in ways that reflect genuine understanding of how the visual world works, how objects relate to each other in space, how light behaves, how different artistic traditions approach representation. The model contains, in a real sense, a compressed representation of human visual culture, distilled into billions of numerical parameters. The weakness is that these datasets contain everything, including things that perhaps should not be there. Copyrighted artwork used without permission, as we discussed, but also biased representations, stereotypes, explicit content, images of real people who never consented to their likeness being used for AI training. The model learns from all of this indiscriminately, absorbing not just aesthetic patterns, but cultural biases embedded in the data. Studies have shown that AI image generators reproduce and sometimes amplify societal biases. Generate images of a CEO, and you will predominantly get white men in suits. Generate a nurse, and you will get mostly women. These patterns reflect the biased distributions in the training data, which in turn reflect real inequalities in the world and in how the world is represented in images online. The AI is holding up a mirror to our culture, but it is a mirror that can reinforce the very patterns we might want to challenge. There are efforts to address these issues. Researchers are developing techniques for debiasing datasets, for making models more fair and representative. Some systems allow users to specify diversity in their generations, to explicitly request representations that counter stereotypical patterns. But these are partial solutions to deep problems, and the fundamental challenge remains. If you train a model on the internet, you're training it on all the internet's flaws and prejudices. Another concern is the potential for misuse. AI-generated images can be used to create deep fakes, convincing but entirely fabricated images of real people doing or saying things they never did. The technology to generate realistic faces, bodies, and scenes can be weaponized for harassment, political manipulation, fraud, and misinformation. A celebrity's face can be placed on explicit content. A politician can be shown in compromising situations that never occurred. Evidence that appears photographic can be manufactured wholesale. The phrase "seeing is believing" is becoming dangerously obsolete. We've entered an era where visual evidence can no longer be trusted by default, where any image might be synthetic, where the burden of verification has become vastly more complex. This has profound implications for journalism, for legal proceedings, for historical record-keeping, for the basic social function of photography as a medium of truth. The camera, which for nearly 2 centuries served as a mechanical witness to reality, has been transformed into just another tool for creating fictions. There are technical responses being developed, watermarking systems that embed invisible signatures into AI-generated images, allowing them to be identified as synthetic. Blockchain-based provenance tracking that creates verifiable chains of custody for digital media. Detection algorithms trained to spot the telltale signs of AI generation. The subtle statistical anomalies that differentiate synthetic from real. But this becomes an arms race. As detection improves, generation improves to evade detection. The synthetic images become more convincing, the detection becomes more sophisticated, and the cycle continues. Perhaps the most fundamental challenge is not technical but cultural. We must collectively develop new forms of media literacy, new skepticism about images, new practices for verifying authenticity. We must accept that the age of photographic innocence is over, that images now exist in a state of permanent epistemological uncertainty. This is disorienting. This is unsettling. But it is the reality we must navigate. Let us turn now to music, another frontier where AI is reshaping creative practice. The principles are similar to visual art, but the domain brings its own unique challenges and possibilities. Music is temporal, unfolding in time, structured by complex rules of harmony, rhythm, and form. Can neural networks learn these structures? Can they compose music that moves listeners, that has the emotional power and aesthetic coherence we associate with great compositions? The answer, as with visual art, is complicated but increasingly affirmative. Early experiments in algorithmic music composition date back decades. David Cope's EMI, or Experiments in Musical Intelligence, was creating Bach-like chorales in the 1980s. Cope's program analyzed existing compositions, extracting patterns and rules, then recombining them to generate new works in similar styles. Musicians and musicologists who heard the results were often unable to distinguish them from genuine Bach, at least in blind tests. But EMI was rule-based, explicitly programmed with musical knowledge. Modern AI music systems use neural networks that learn from data, discovering musical patterns through the same kind of statistical learning that powers image generation. Magenta, a research project from Google, has developed models that can generate melodies, harmonies, drum patterns, even complete musical arrangements. MuseNet and Jukebox from OpenAI can generate music in various styles, from classical to jazz to pop, sometimes with remarkable coherence and musicality. Suno and Udio, more recent commercial systems, allow users to generate complete songs with vocals, instruments, and production, all from text prompts. Type an upbeat pop song about summer and receive a fully produced track complete with lyrics, melody, harmony, and arrangement. The results are often surprisingly good, catchy and polished, though they typically lack the depth and emotional resonance of carefully crafted human compositions. The technical challenge in music is managing temporal coherence over longer timescales. A neural network can easily learn local patterns, how notes follow each other in melodic sequences, how chords progress from moment to moment. But music has structure at multiple scales. Phrases build into sections, sections into movements, movements into complete works. A satisfying composition has development, contrast, return, a sense of journey and resolution. Teaching networks to maintain coherence over these longer arcs is significantly harder than generating locally plausible sequences. Some of the most interesting work in AI music focuses not on full composition, but on collaboration and augmentation. Eva, an AI composer, works with human musicians to generate orchestral pieces, providing raw material that human composers then edit and refine. Google's Magenta Studio offers plugins for digital audio workstations, allowing musicians to use AI to generate variations, continue melodies, add accompaniment, or explore harmonic possibilities. The AI becomes a co-creator, a source of ideas and alternatives, but the human remains in control of the overall artistic vision. David Bowie was an early explorer of algorithmic creativity in music. He used a program called the verbicizer to randomly recombine words and phrases, generating unexpected combinations that sparked creative ideas. The process was not about letting the algorithm compose for him, but about using randomness and recombination to break out of habitual patterns, to discover new possibilities he would not have arrived at through conscious intention alone. Modern AI music tools offer similar possibilities, but at a vastly more sophisticated level. Holly Herndon, an experimental musician and sound artist, has embraced AI as a central element of her practice. Her album Proto featured an AI system she developed called Spawn. Trained on recordings of her own voice and those of her collaborators, Spawn would generate new vocal sounds, strange and uncanny but unmistakably related to the training voices. Herndon describes the process as creating a new ensemble member, an artificial voice that participates in the music alongside human voices, blurring the boundaries between human and machine performance. The results are fascinating, often beautiful, sometimes unsettling. The AI vocals have a quality that is neither quite human nor quite machine, occupying some liminal space between. They extend Herndon's artistic vocabulary, allowing her to explore sonic territories that would be impossible with human voices alone. And crucially, Herndon maintains control over how the AI is used, what it is trained on, how its outputs are incorporated into the finished work. The technology serves her artistic vision rather than replacing it, but just as with visual art, AI music raises economic and ethical concerns. Royalty-free music libraries increasingly contain AI-generated tracks, undercutting human composers who rely on such work for income. Major music labels are exploring AI tools that could generate production music, jingles, background scores, all the utilitarian music that supports media, but that working musicians depend on for their livelihoods. The same displacement dynamics we see in visual art are beginning to emerge in music. Copyright in music is particularly complex because musical compositions involve multiple layers of ownership. The melody and lyrics, the specific recording, the performance, all can have separate copyright holders. AI systems trained on copyrighted music raise questions about whether they are infringing on these rights. If an AI generates a melody that is similar to an existing copyrighted melody, but not identical, is that infringement? What threshold of similarity constitutes copying rather than coincidental resemblance? These questions have always been difficult in music law, and AI makes them vastly more complicated. There have already been controversies. In 2023, an AI-generated song using synthesized voices of Drake and The Weeknd went viral, accumulating millions of streams before being removed from platforms. The song was musically competent, stylistically similar to both artists' work, and entirely synthetic. Neither artist was involved or compensated. The incident highlighted how AI could be used to create ersatz versions of popular artists, potentially diluting their brands, confusing audiences, and diverting revenue. Some artists are fighting back. Several major musicians have begun including clauses in their contracts prohibiting the use of their voices or likenesses for AI training or synthesis. Industry organizations are pushing for regulations that would require consent before an artist's voice can be used to train AI systems. But enforcement is challenging, especially when training datasets are assembled from publicly available recordings scraped from the internet without regard for licensing. Meanwhile, other artists are experimenting with selling or licensing their voices to AI systems. Grimes, for example, released a voice model trained on her vocals and invited producers to use it, offering to split royalties on any successful songs. This approach treats the AI-synthesized voice as a form of sample or licensed asset, maintaining the artist's control and ensuring compensation. It is one possible model for how AI voice synthesis could coexist with artist rights, though it remains to be seen whether this approach will scale or become standard practice. Literature and creative writing represent another domain where AI is making rapid advances. Large language models like GPT-3 and GPT-4, the technologies underlying ChatGPT, can generate coherent and often compelling text on virtually any topic. They can write stories, poems, essays, dialogue, in various styles and voices. The quality varies, but the best outputs can be surprisingly sophisticated, displaying wit, narrative structure, even something resembling emotional intelligence. The technical approach is different from image or music generation. Language models are trained on vast corpora of text, learning to predict the next word in a sequence based on the words that came before. Through this simple predictive task, repeated trillions of times across billions of text examples, the models develop an implicit understanding of grammar, semantics, facts about the world, even reasoning and conversational patterns. They learn that certain words follow others, that sentences have structure, that different contexts require different vocabularies and tones. What emerges is a system that can generate remarkably human-like text. The model has no understanding in any deep sense, no consciousness or intention, but it can produce outputs that are coherent, contextually appropriate and often creative. It can continue a story in a consistent style, write a poem that follows specified constraints, explain complex topics in accessible language, even engage in something resembling conversation. Writers are exploring these tools with mixed reactions. Some find them useful for overcoming writer's block, generating ideas, exploring different narrative possibilities. The AI can produce multiple variations of a scene, suggest plot twists, generate dialogue for minor characters, all of which the writer can then edit and refine. Others view AI writing tools as a threat, potentially devaluing human creativity, flooding the market with cheap content, reducing writing to formulaic patterns. The publishing industry is grappling with AI-generated content. Amazon's Kindle store has seen a surge of AI-written books, often low quality but produced in such volume that they clutter search results and make it harder for human authors to be discovered. Some publishers have banned AI-generated submissions, while others are exploring how AI tools might be used ethically as part of the creative process. The boundary between legitimate use as a writing aid and problematic replacement of human creativity is contested and unclear. There are also concerns about voice and authenticity. A significant part of what makes writing valuable is that it comes from a specific person, reflects their unique perspective and experience, carries their voice. AI-generated text, no matter how polished, lacks this authenticity. It is not written by someone but produced by something, a statistical pattern matcher generating plausible sequences. Readers who discover that a book or article was AI-generated often feel deceived, as if the implicit contract between writer and reader has been violated. Yet some writers are finding ways to collaborate with AI that feel generative rather than ersatz. Robin Sloan, a novelist and technologist, has experimented extensively with AI writing tools, using them to explore narrative possibilities and generate surprising juxtapositions. He describes the process as conversation, prompting the AI, seeing what it produces, responding with new prompts, gradually shaping the output through iterative dialogue. The final work is a hybrid, containing both AI-generated elements and heavy human editing and curation. Ailard McDowell co-wrote a book with GPT-3 titled Pharmaco-AI, an exploration of consciousness, technology, and mysticism. The book explicitly acknowledges its hybrid authorship, presenting itself as a genuine collaboration between human and machine intelligence. The AI's contributions are often strange, making unexpected associations, introducing ideas that Ailard McDowell would not have thought of independently. The result is not a conventional book, but something more experimental, a literary artifact of this transitional moment when AI is beginning to participate in creative processes. These experiments point toward possible futures where AI is a creative partner rather than a replacement. The technology provides capabilities that extend human creativity, offering new perspectives, accelerating exploration, generating alternatives. But the human remains essential for judgment, curation, meaning-making, for the intentional shaping of raw generation into finished work. This vision is optimistic, perhaps overly so, but it represents one path through the disruption we are experiencing. The challenge is ensuring that this collaborative future is accessible to working creatives, that the economic benefits do not accrue only to the technology companies, while artists are displaced and impoverished. This requires collective action, policy interventions, new business models that fairly compensate creators even as AI tools become more powerful. It requires, in short, that we actively shape how these technologies are deployed, rather than simply accepting whatever the market produces. Let us consider now some of the specific artistic movements and styles that have emerged specifically from and around AI. Just as photography eventually developed its own aesthetic languages distinct from painting, and digital art developed idioms specific to its medium, AI art is beginning to develop recognizable genres and approaches that reflect the unique capabilities and constraints of these tools. One such style is the glitch aesthetic, embracing the errors and artifacts that AI systems produce. When neural networks fail, they often fail in visually interesting ways, generating impossible geometries, surreal juxtapositions, dreamlike distortions. Some artists deliberately seek out these failures, pushing models beyond their training domains, crafting prompts designed to confuse or break the system, mining the space of machine error for aesthetic material. The results can be hauntingly beautiful, revealing the alien quality of machine vision, the ways these systems see and interpret the world differently from humans. Another emerging genre is the latent space exploration, where artists treat the high-dimensional space of a neural network's learned representations as a terrain to be explored and mapped. Every possible image exists somewhere in this space, and the artist's task becomes one of navigation, discovering interesting regions, charting paths through the vast territory of potential images. This is a kind of meta-art, making art about the space of possibilities rather than creating specific artifacts. Style blending and anachronism have become common in AI art. Because the models have learned from images spanning all of history and culture, they can seamlessly combine elements that would never coexist in reality. Medieval knights rendered as cyberpunk characters, Renaissance portraits with glitch effects, ancient Egyptian art in the style of anime. These combinations would be laborious to create by hand, requiring extensive skill in multiple artistic traditions, but AI systems generate them effortlessly, having learned all these styles as different regions of the same vast visual space. There is also a movement toward AI-assisted surrealism, using machine generation to create images that are coherent at a local level but bizarre when considered as a whole. The AI is good at generating plausible details, but sometimes struggles with global consistency, and this tendency can be exploited to create genuinely surreal images, impossible architectures, creatures that could not exist, scenes that violate the laws of physics in subtle ways that evoke unease or wonder. Some artists use AI to reimagine history, generating images of historical events or figures in ways that challenge or complicate our understanding. An AI-generated portrait of a historical person might show them in an anachronistic setting, prompting reflection on how we construct historical narratives. Images of events that never happened but could have created speculative histories, alternative timelines visualized in rich detail. The speed of AI generation enables new forms of reactive and ephemeral art. Artists can generate images in response to current events within hours, creating visual commentary that would be impossible with traditional media. Entire series of related images can be produced in a day, exploring variations on a theme with a thoroughness that would take weeks or months by hand. This enables a kind of creative abundance, a profusion of visual experimentation that was previously constrained by the slowness of traditional artistic production. But this abundance comes with its own challenges. When you can generate 100 images in an hour, how do you maintain quality control? How do you resist the temptation to simply keep generating, chasing the next interesting output, never settling on anything finished? Some AI artists report that the ease of generation makes it harder to commit to specific pieces, to declare something complete and worthy of presentation. The creative process becomes less about painstakingly crafting a single work, and more about curation, sifting through vast quantities of generated material to find the pieces that truly resonate. This is not necessarily worse than traditional artistic practice, but it is different. It shifts the locus of creativity from execution to conception and selection. The skill becomes less about technical ability with physical media and more about taste, judgment, the ability to recognize quality and meaning in the outputs. It becomes, in a sense, more conceptual, more about the ideas and the curation than about the making. We should also consider the environmental costs of AI art, a dimension often overlooked in discussions focused on aesthetics and economics. Training large neural networks requires enormous computational resources, consuming vast amounts of electricity. GPT-3's training run is estimated to have produced as much carbon dioxide as 5 cars over their entire lifetimes. Image generation models are similarly resource-intensive, and while training happens once, the generation of individual images also consumes significant energy, especially at scale. As AI art becomes ubiquitous, as millions of people generate billions of images, the cumulative environmental impact becomes substantial. This is not an argument against the technology per se, but it is a cost that must be acknowledged and addressed. More efficient algorithms, renewable energy for computation, carbon offsets, these are all part of the picture. The beauty of AI-generated images should not blind us to the material costs of their production. There is also the question of electronic waste. The cutting-edge GPUs required for AI training and generation become obsolete quickly as new architectures emerge. The mining of rare earth elements for these chips, the energy consumed in their manufacture, the disposal of outdated hardware, all contribute to environmental degradation. The digital realm feels clean and immaterial, but it rests on a foundation of physical infrastructure with real environmental costs. Moving forward, we must ask what kind of future we want to build with these technologies. The path we're on now, driven primarily by market forces and corporate interests, leads toward concentration of power, displacement of working artists, flooding of the cultural ecosystem with disposable content, and deepening skepticism about the authenticity of any media. This is not inevitable. These are choices, and we can make different choices. One possibility is robust regulation, laws that protect artist rights, require consent for training data, ensure fair compensation, mandate transparency about AI use. Some jurisdictions are beginning to move in this direction. The European Union's AI Act includes provisions for creative work. Individual artists and collectives are pushing for similar regulations elsewhere. But regulation is slow and technology moves fast. By the time comprehensive legal frameworks are in place, the landscape may have shifted again. Another approach is technical, building tools and systems that are inherently more ethical. Training models only on properly licensed data, or on public domain works, or on synthetic data generated specifically for training. Developing watermarking and provenance systems that make AI-generated content identifiable. Creating platforms that fairly compensate the artist whose work contributed to training data. Some of these efforts are underway, though they face significant economic and technical challenges. Cultural change may be the most important lever. If we collectively decide that human-made art has irreducible value, that the connection to a human creator matters, then AI art becomes supplementary rather than replacement. Markets can adapt to preference human work, building in premiums for verified human creation. Audiences can develop appreciation for the specific qualities that human artists bring. Education can emphasize media literacy, critical thinking about images, understanding of how AI systems work and what their limitations are. But perhaps the most profound question is what AI art reveals about us, about our relationship with creativity and meaning. For most of human history, art was the exclusive domain of humans, one of the clearest markers of our uniqueness. Now machines can create images and music and text that rival human productions, at least in technical proficiency. This forces us to reckon with what creativity actually is, why it matters, what we're actually valuing when we value art. If we discover that much of what we thought was the irreducible humanity of art can be replicated by algorithms, does that diminish art, or does it challenge our understanding of ourselves? If machines can be creative, does that mean creativity is not as special as we thought? Or does it expand our conception of what is possible, what entities can participate in the creative process? These are not questions with easy answers. They touch on consciousness, on the nature of mind, on what it means to be human in a world where the boundaries between human and machine capabilities are becoming increasingly blurred. AI art is not just an aesthetic or economic phenomenon. It is a mirror reflecting deep questions about intelligence, creativity, value, and meaning. Some philosophers argue that what we're experiencing is a crisis of anthropocentrism, the assumption that humans are fundamentally special and unique. AI challenges this assumption by demonstrating that capacities we thought were distinctly human can emerge in non-human systems. This can feel threatening, undermining our sense of special status. But it can also be liberating, opening up new possibilities for what mind and creativity might be, expanding rather than diminishing the space of meaningful existence. Others maintain that there remains a categorical difference between human and machine creativity, that lived experience and consciousness are necessary for genuine creation, that AI art is simulation rather than the real thing. From this view, no matter how sophisticated AI becomes, it will never truly create in the way humans do because it lacks the inner life that gives meaning to the creative act. Both perspectives have merit, and perhaps the truth is that we are in a transitional period where categories are still being negotiated. In 100 years, if AI art is ubiquitous and AI systems have developed far beyond their current capabilities, perhaps our descendants will have clearer answers to these questions, or perhaps the questions themselves will have evolved, become less urgent, replaced by new concerns we cannot yet imagine. What seems certain is that we cannot go back. The technology exists, is improving rapidly, is being deployed at scale. We can shape how it is used, can fight for equitable outcomes, can insist on preserving space for human creativity, but we cannot uninvent it. We're in the rapids now, navigating fast-moving currents, and the shore we reach will depend on the choices we make in these critical years. So where does this leave us? Here at the end of our journey through the strange landscape where artificial intelligence meets art. We have explored the technical mechanisms, the philosophical questions, the economic disruptions, the aesthetic possibilities, the ethical concerns. We have seen how AI challenges our assumptions about creativity, authorship, and meaning. We have considered possible futures, some optimistic and collaborative, others dystopian and displacing. The truth is, we're still in the early days. Everything I have described is happening now, but it is also just beginning. The tools will become more powerful, more accessible, more integrated into creative practice. The legal and ethical frameworks will evolve. The culture will adapt, finding new equilibria, new ways of valuing human and machine-made art. And through it all, humans will continue to create, because creation is not just about the outputs, but about the process, the need to express, to explore, to communicate. Art has always been shaped by available technologies. The invention of oil paint changed what was possible in visual art. The development of recording technology transformed music. Digital tools revolutionized design and illustration. AI is the latest in this long series of technological revolutions. More dramatic than some, perhaps, but part of a continuous story of human creativity adapting to and adopting new capabilities. What remains essential is that we preserve space for human agency, that we ensure these technologies serve human flourishing rather than replacing or impoverishing it. We must fight for the rights and livelihoods of working artists. We must demand transparency and accountability from the companies developing these tools. We must cultivate appreciation for human creativity, even as we explore what machines can do. We must, in short, remain human even as we create technologies that can mimic some of what humans do. The future of art in the age of AI will be written by all of us, through the choices we make as creators, as consumers, as citizens. It will be written in the policies we enact, the tools we build, the values we uphold, the kinds of creation we choose to support and celebrate. It is not predetermined, it is not inevitable, it is ours to shape. And perhaps that is the most important insight of all. For all the power of these technologies, for all the disruption they bring, they are tools created by humans for human purposes. They do not have goals or desires of their own. They reflect our choices, our values, the world we have built. If that world is unjust, if artists are exploited, if creativity is devalued, that is not the fault of the algorithms, but of the systems we have allowed to develop around them. So as you go forward, as you encounter AI art in your own life, as you perhaps even create with these tools yourself, remember that you are participating in something larger. Every choice about whether to use AI, how to credit it, what to create with it, what to value and support, these choices aggregate into the collective future we are building. Be thoughtful, be intentional, be human. And maybe, just maybe, we can navigate this transition in a way that expands human creativity rather than diminishing it, that adds new possibilities to our expressive palette rather than replacing what came before. Maybe we can build a future where human and machine creativity coexist, where the unique qualities of each are valued, where technology serves to amplify rather than supplant human creative vision. That future is not guaranteed. It will take work, vigilance, collective action. But it is possible, and in the possibility lies hope. So let us move forward with eyes open, aware of the challenges and the opportunities, committed to shaping these technologies toward human flourishing, determined to preserve what is essential about human creativity even as we explore new frontiers. The quiet revolution is not over. It has only just begun, and we are all part of how it unfolds, whether we choose to be or not. The question is not whether AI and art will continue to mix and evolve together. They will. The question is what kind of mixture we will create, what kind of art world we will build, what values we will embed in the technologies and systems that shape culture in the years ahead. So wherever you are, I hope this journey has given you new perspective, new questions, new ways of seeing the images and sounds and words that fill your world. Art has always been a conversation between humans, across time and space and culture. AI is adding new voices to that conversation, strange and powerful voices that challenge us to reconsider everything we thought we knew. Listen to them, question them, respond to them, and above all, keep creating, keep expressing, keep reaching across the distance to touch other minds with your unique human perspective. Because in the end, that is what art has always been about. Not perfection, not technical mastery, not even beauty, but connection. Human to human, mind to mind, one consciousness reaching out to another saying, I was here, I saw this, I felt this, and maybe you understand. No algorithm, no matter how sophisticated, can replace that. And as long as we remember that, as long as we value that, human art will endure, will matter, will continue to be the precious, irreplaceable thing it has always been. Thank you for walking this long road with me tonight. I hope you found something worth thinking about, something that will stay with you, change how you see the world around you. And I hope, wherever you go from here, you carry with you a deeper appreciation for both the remarkable capabilities of these new technologies and the irreducible value of human creativity. They are not enemies. They do not have to be. But ensuring they can coexist, that both can flourish, that will take all of us working together, making conscious choices about the future we want to build. Sleep well, dream well, and when you wake, look at the world with fresh eyes, seeing both the algorithms and the humans, the machines and the minds, the simulations and the genuine article, all mixed together in this strange, beautiful, challenging moment we're living through. We are witnesses to something profound, and perhaps, if we are thoughtful and determined, we can also be architects of something better. Good night.